Hello and welcome to the New South Wales Family Daycare Association Professional Development session on Great Spaces, Safe Spaces in Family Daycare. My name is Elizabeth and I'm your presenter for this session. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Gadigal peoples of the Eora Nation, the traditional owners of the country on which our office is located, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. We acknowledge that Aboriginal families have cared and educated children on this land for tens of thousands of years. This session has been funded through the Early Childhood Education Directorate of the New South Wales Department of Education. The department approached New South Wales Family Daycare to develop a range of resources, including this webinar, that focused on Quality Area 2 and Quality Area 3 of the National Quality Standard, because they had discovered that some family daycare services and educators were struggling with these areas. As I hope everyone is aware, Quality Area 2 is children's safety and Quality Area 3 is physical environment. We are going to be exploring these topics by looking at creating learning spaces, eating and playing, keeping children safe, good practices, keeping children healthy, and what happens if something goes wrong. We will then talk about where you can find out further information on these topics. It's important to note that this webinar session is geared towards less experienced educators, but I am confident that more experienced educators will also be able to take away valuable information. The first topic we will look at today is creating learning spaces in family daycare. These photos have been provided by actual family daycare services, so demonstrate great examples of what can be created in your own home. Some family daycare educators are often unsure of what they can implement in their home, so we hope these visuals provide some great inspiration. So why do we need great learning spaces? Babies and children learn every day, including in family daycare. Family daycare is an education and care service, so while we were caring for children, we are also educating them. As a family daycare educator, you have to create learning spaces, spaces where babies and children can learn from. These spaces will be in your home and places outside your home which you may visit on excursions. Your choice of equipment, materials and toys and where you choose to put them in your home will impact how children can learn. They will also impact how children behave and feel and how you as an educator behave and feel while you have the children in your home. The main things you need to do to create great learning spaces in family daycare are organise and set up indoor and outdoor spaces so that children are learning in both natural and built places. Have enough materials, so toys and equipment, so that every child can play through play child learning, and show how you care for the environment, and this will help children to learn how to care for it themselves. Children look to us as role models, and if we are enthusiastic about the spaces we have created, then they will be too. Children will model enthusiasm if we listen to their ideas and gather their input, observe how they interact with the environment, and they will respect the learning spaces. In this picture, we can see a really rich learning environment that is developing many different skills. There are natural objects, the child is working with mathematical skills, and it's only in a small space. The resources in this photo are very accessible, and there is also a lot of opportunity to expand on the learning that is happening. So how do we create positive spaces? We can create positive spaces by defining spaces, setting up indoor spaces, setting up outdoor spaces, spaces to read, build things, imagine, and spaces to build bodies. When providing education and care in your home, it's important that you work out how to separate the space to make it clear which spaces you are using for family daycare. Obviously, some spaces, such as the kitchen, will be used by you both to educate and care for the children, and used by your family when the children are gone. Are there some spaces that you can use just for working with the children? There are many ways you can separate out spaces for educational activities within bigger spaces. Possible methods to define spaces include using a rug on a carpeted area, putting up an umbrella outside, facing a chair away from the centre of the room, or using child-sized tables and chairs to create a room. In the outdoor area, you can create musical spaces, digging spaces, stepping stones, reading spaces, cubby houses, active spaces, and places to grow plants. Also keep in mind, when experiencing wet weather or extreme heat, for example, we still need to provide active play. So think of how this can be done inside. All different types of play can be created. We can see another example here of a great family daycare setup. The resources are all in reach, they are inviting and engaging. There is a lot of timber furniture, so moving away from plastics and creating a more natural environment. The shelves provide opportunity for resources to be changed over or rotated, and everything is nice and organised. Role modelling how the children should care for the environment is so important. This is an example of how to demonstrate to children how they should care for individual resources. In this slide, we can see how the environments look inviting while also being adaptable. It encourages different skill sets and imagination. For example, the educator has instigated play by placing the trucks in the sandpit, which then encourages imaginative, open-ended play for the children. When you go back to your service, look at the resources you already have and think about ways they can be used in different forms. Here we can see a recycling centre that is very simple in its setup, but a really effective and appealing addition to the learning environment. The baskets look beautiful and the educator has added visual cards so children can independently sort materials. There is also a game that supports recycling education, and the sustainable practices are carried through to the outdoor space with the children watering the garden. So some really great examples there of simple but effective planning that can be done in any home. Let's now look at the laws and regulations that guide our practice in relation to learning spaces. As a family daycare educator, you need to follow special laws about learning spaces in family daycare. The main documents to follow are the Education and Care Services Law and the Education and Care Services Regulations. In regards to physical environment, the law and regulations require different things from you as an educator and from your service as a family daycare provider. Most of the laws and regulations relating to creating learning spaces require your provider to do something. Your family daycare provider has to make sure that every reasonable precaution is taken to protect children from harm or hazard that could cause an injury while they are with you, and that's in section 167 of the law. They also need to make sure that there is enough furniture, materials and toys and equipment for the children that you are caring for, and that's in regulation 105. They need to make sure that the premises and all equipment and furniture used in providing family daycare is safe, clean and in good repair, and that's found in regulation 103. The laws and regulations are designed to keep children safe while in your care. We will now move on to our next topic, which is eating and playing in family daycare. Why is eating and playing so important in family daycare? Children in Australia are becoming overweight. If we help children learn healthy eating habits and physical activity skills, they will maintain these throughout their lives. Family daycare provides opportunity for children to learn about healthy food choices from you as their educator and also from other children. Eating habits developed as a child affect people throughout their lives. Physical activity helps children's brains and muscles grow and helps children become confident about what they can do and enjoy being active. As an educator, you need to encourage physical activity that is hard, extends thinking, and offers opportunities to take some risks. These risks need to be managed and supervised while also allowing for opportunity for children to assess risk and process information. It could be as simple as a young child who is crawling with access to steps, and they will process the information and options. Will I attempt to climb down the steps? Am I capable? And is this safe for me? So a simple activity can provide a great learning opportunity. So how do we make sure children are eating and playing well? By providing good food or encouraging parents to provide good food, by giving lots of activity to play, and by teaching children about healthy food and healthy movement. Food needs to be good food. Think about the kinds of conversations you have with families about the sorts of food children should and shouldn't eat in family daycare. Think about how you can encourage families to send good food to family daycare. If children are providing food from home, this can be an additional challenge for educators. They also need to educate families on what to provide. Educators need to teach children about nutrition, and they need to support breastfeeding mothers, always having water available, and never giving babies solids until the parents ask. Educators also need to ensure that children are served safe food, so think about allergies, choking risks, and food poisoning from incorrect reheating food. If you are at all unsure about food safety procedures, contact your coordinator. They will have specific policies and procedures on things such as reheating food. As a family daycare educator, you need to make sure you have physical games and activities as part of the program. Support each child to do physical things and help them learn physical skills. Be part of physical activity and demonstrate to children how fun it can be. Make sure that children you care for have time for active play, and talk to the children about how their bodies work and how important physical activity is. Help children to take small risks in play, and make areas for babies to practice rolling over, sitting, crawling, standing, walking, and climbing. Do things like singing action songs, dancing, and throwing and kicking balls. Ensure that you limit screen time in family daycare, especially during meal times, to ensure children are focused on the task and are consciously aware of what they're eating. You can also get children to role model for each other, for example, older children demonstrating for younger children, and good eaters encouraging fussier children. So what do the regs and laws say in regards to eating and playing? The most important parts of the law and regulations in regards to eating and playing require a family daycare educator. For example, these are a requirement put on you directly, not the family daycare provider, to use adequate health and hygiene practices and safe practices for handling, preparing, and storing food so that children don't get sick from food at your family daycare, and that's Regulation 77. Family daycare educators need to make sure that children can get a drink of water whenever they are thirsty and are offered food and water throughout the day, and that's Regulation 78. Educators need to make sure that the food children are provided is nutritious and there is enough of it, and that it is age appropriate and is appropriate for children's culture, religion, and health. All of these only apply if you're providing the food rather than the parents, and that's found in Regulation 79. If you do provide food rather than the parents, you need to show a menu for the week that describes the actual food you will be giving children each day. The menu requirements can be found in Regulation 80. A great idea is to get menu feedback and suggestions from family and children so that your service menu reflects a collaboration of all families. The next topic we will look at is keeping children safe in family daycare. Why is keeping children safe so important? Families, the government, your service, and you want to keep children safe while they're at family daycare. As the adult and the educator, the responsibility to keep children safe falls on you. Family daycare educators have a responsibility to ensure that their home is safe, that they supervise children at all times, and to make sure that they do not hurt themselves. They need to think about what they are doing with the children, what they are doing in the home, and what the possible dangers of this could be, and understand the laws that they need to follow as an educator that the government has put in place to help keep children safe. You as the educator need to understand the laws and constantly check that they are being followed. Each home environment is very unique, so each home needs to be assessed differently. The best person to do this is the educator, as they are most familiar with the home environment. So how do we keep children safe in family daycare? Supervising, which is keeping watch over children, is the main way children are safe. You need to be able to respond immediately if a child is upset or if a child is doing something that may hurt them or another child. When an educator is supervising all children at all times, you can stop accidents from happening by anticipating them. You need to know where all the children in your care are at all times and make sure you know what they are doing. Supervising does not necessarily mean directly playing or being with the children at all time. Challenging situations can include when an educator needs to change a nappy. Skills such as scanning and grouping are really effective ways to maintain supervision. For example, having the change table still in view of the playroom so you can scan over the children and anticipate any hazards. As a family daycare educator, you also need to keep children safe by reducing and eliminating potential harm and hazards. Make sure your house, your yard, and everything in them are safe by doing daily safety checks, locking up poisons, shutting up parts of your house, and having safety equipment like fire rugs and extinguishers. Making sure children are safe from people by using working with children's checks, keeping a record of who comes into the home, mandatory reporting, and never leaving children alone with other adults in your home. Take particular care on excursions and when children are sleeping, as these can be high-risk times. Always be aware of policies and procedures surrounding excursion risk management and safe sleep. Red Nose website provides educators and families with the most current research-based safe sleep information. So what do the laws and regulations say about keeping children safe? Educators must take every reasonable precaution to protect a child from harm and from any hazard that might hurt them. This is Section 167 of the law. Make sure nobody uses tobacco, illicit drugs or alcohol while children are in the home. Regulation 82. You also can't drink or have drugs that make it hard for you to care for children, and that's in Regulation 83. Keep a record of any incident, injury, trauma and illness that happens, as stated in Regulation 87, and keep a first aid kit that is easy to recognise and easy to access. This is Regulation 89. Do not let children leave your home unless they are with a parent or someone who has been given permission by a parent in writing or on an excursion form. Only take a child on an excursion when you have done a proper written assessment, stated in Regulation 100 and 101, and have written permission from the parent. Your family daycare provider will give you the forms for these. Report if you see anything that makes you think that the child is being abused, neglected, or hurt. All family daycare educators should be very familiar with the mandatory reporting guide. As an educator, the main ways that children get hurt are drowning, cuts, falls, burns, poisoning, and abuse. Think about ways children could drown in your home. Think about ways you may not have considered, such as buckets, ponds, bathtubs, and laundry sinks. What about ways that they could cut themselves, ways they could burn themselves, including sunburn? Are there places that they could find poison? Remember that alcohol and drugs are also poisonous to young children. The next topic we will discuss is keeping children healthy in family daycare. While you have children in your home as a family daycare educator, it's your role to keep them healthy. You also need to make sure that children who have special medical conditions such as allergies or asthma have their needs taken care of. Why is keeping children healthy in family daycare such an issue? It's because children's bodies are not yet very good at fighting germs. They get sicker more often when they come into contact with those germs. Because you will be caring for children from different families, children will come into contact to different germs from the ones they are used to. Children are also very good at spreading germs. They play and crawl on the ground, they touch each other, and they are not very good at wiping their noses. They also put things into their mouth. Because of this, there are more chances of a child becoming sick at family daycare and then other children catching that illness. So you have to work a lot harder to make sure children in your care don't get sick. We keep children healthy by stopping germs from spreading, especially from sneezes and coughs and from touching things with germs. We do this by washing hands a lot, not caring for sick children, and by immunization. We need to keep our home especially clean and take special precautions when changing nappies. There are special exclusion periods for specific illnesses, and you can access these in Staying Healthy in Childcare, which you can access online. It has lots of useful information for educators, such as finding out exclusion periods for different illnesses and understanding the symptoms to look out for. When you have a child with a specific illness, such as anaphylaxis or diabetes, you have to have a risk management plan, a medication management plan, and a communication plan to make sure that the child is safe. This will be provided by a medical professional, such as a GP or dietitian. You need to follow specific procedures when you need to give children medication. You should have clear policies and procedures surrounding the administration of medication. You need to have handover procedures and documentation when families want to bring in medication. For example, it must be labelled with the medication name, the child's name, expiry date, dosage, and method of administration. Educators and parents need to sign off on medication forms. So what do the laws and regulations say about staying healthy? The laws about children's health falls on the educators. You have to follow good health, hygiene and safe food practices as stated in Regulation 77. You need to make sure children can always have access to a drink of water and are offered food and drinks regularly as stated in Regulation 78. Make sure children can rest or sleep when they need to, Regulation 81, and only give a child medicine or tablets when their parents have filled out a form. You must also keep a record of when you give it to them, as stated in Regulation 92. Your family daycare provider can provide you with such forms. You must give a child asthma medication or use their EpiPen if you think they are having an asthma attack or an anaphylactic reaction. Call the parents and an ambulance if you have to do this. You have to hold a current approved first aid qualification and anaphylaxis and asthma management training. Tell your family daycare provider if yours is about to expire. This is noted in Regulation 136. Now, let's look at what happens if something goes wrong in family daycare. As an educator, you have to plan and practice for emergencies so that you know what to do if something goes wrong. As a family daycare educator, you need to always be aware that you are alone with children if an emergency occurs. Educators must plan how to deal with emergencies before they happen. If an emergency occurs, you will be prepared and can react calmly and follow what you have practiced. You must supervise children at all times in the best way to keep children safe while they are inside your home. Educators should practice emergency evacuations in case you need to quickly leave with the children. You need to have a clear plan on who to call and what you should do when different types of emergencies occur. Educators are the best people to prepare for emergencies that may occur in their own home. You are aware and familiar of the environment and your local surrounds. For example, is your home on a busy road? Do you back onto a river that's subject to flooding? Or do you have visits from wildlife such as snakes? Make sure when you are rehearsing emergency procedures that you carry out risk assessments appropriate to your home and area. On the slide here, we can see an example from a family daycare service of a fire evacuation plan. There is a clear diagram and plenty of details on how to evacuate. We can see there are emergency numbers and clear instructions for educators to follow. On this slide, we can see a general explanation of how to respond to an asthma attack. This poster would complement a child's individual asthma plan or be useful for a child that doesn't have an individual asthma plan who may be having an attack for the first time. There is also another good example of an evacuation plan. Here we can see a hold my hand sign, which is often seen in entrances, reminding parents to hold their child's hand when vehicles are about. There's also a good example of how to store and clearly label first aid and medication. The best way to be prepared is think about what could go wrong, know what to do if it does, and plan so it doesn't. Remember, you are required to do an evacuation and lockdown procedure at least every 3 months. And as mentioned before, consider also planning for very likely events in your service. What will you do if there's a gas leak? Is your bushfire plan up to date? Think about the things that would most frequently affect you. You can rehearse for a variety of emergencies, and you can also consult your local fire or council authorities for advice. So what do the laws and regs say about emergencies and hazard reduction? So educators have to take reasonable precautions to protect a child from harm and from any hazard that might hurt them. Follow your family daycare provider's incident, injury, trauma and illness policy and procedures. These outline what you must do in an event that a child is injured, becomes ill or suffers a trauma. These are known as serious incidents. Notify parents as soon as possible if any child is involved in a serious incident while in your care. You need to fill out specific forms, so an incident, injury, trauma and illness record, which your family daycare provider will give you. This form needs to include what you did, what happened to the child, and any first aid or medicine given. This form must be given to your family daycare provider within 24 hours. Keep a record of any serious incident, injury, trauma or illness that happens to a child, and your family daycare provider will give you the forms to do this. Keep a first aid kit that has first aid supplies, is easy to recognize and easy to access, as stated in Regulation 89. Your service has to make sure that they do risk assessments and have policies about emergencies, you have an emergency exit plan, and that you practice evacuations. You need to tell parents if a child has had an infectious disease at your family daycare. So this brings us to the end of our session. If you do have any further questions about any of the topics that we've discussed, you can contact your service provider, the New South Wales Department of Education, or New South Wales Family Daycare Association. The contact details are available for you on the next slide. There are also 7 booklets and videos that support all the information in this session. You can find these videos and booklets and other useful links at www.nswfdc.org.au/Great Spaces. Thank you everyone for taking the time to watch this session. We hope you have learnt some valuable information to ensure your service is safe and improve your practice as a family daycare educator.